The first time Liam held my hand we were 7. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not really. It was on the cracked asphalt of the school playground after I'd skinned my knee chasing a runaway ball. He'd helped me up, his small hand warm and slightly sticky from the lollipop he'd just finished, and declared, "Don't cry, Alara. I'll protect you." In that moment, with tears and gravel dust streaking my cheeks, he became my entire world. 20 years later I was still letting him. "Alara, are you even listening? God, sometimes I think you live in a fantasy land." Liam's voice, sharp with a familiar impatience, cut through the soft jazz of the upscale restaurant. I blinked, pulling my gaze from the mesmerizing dance of candlelight on my wine glass to his face. It was a face I knew better than my own, the same dark floppy hair that used to fall into his eyes as a boy, now expertly styled. The same moss-green eyes that could crinkle with laughter, though they did that less and less for me. The same stubborn set to his jaw that had been charming in a rebellious teenager and was exhausting in a 30-year-old man. "Sorry," I said, my voice automatically smoothing into the placating tone I'd perfected over the years. "I was just thinking about the Patterson account. It's finally closed." I offered this like a peace offering, a shiny trinket to distract him from his annoyance. He barely acknowledged it, taking a sip of his bourbon. "Good. That's your job after all. I was talking about the Hamptons. Mom and Dad are expecting us for the full weekend. Sebastian will be there with his new girlfriend, and you know how competitive he gets." Expecting us. The words should have felt like an embrace, a confirmation of our shared life. Instead they felt like a leash. I was an accessory in the narrative of Liam Hayes, successful architect and golden boy. The childhood sweetheart turned long-term girlfriend. The reliable, steady Alara who ran his household, managed his social calendar and soothed his ego, all while running my own moderately successful interior design firm. My achievements were footnotes, his were headlines. "Of course," I murmured, tracing the rim of my glass. "I'll make sure Mrs. Davison waters the ficus." He gave a curt nod, his attention already snagged by his phone lighting up on the table. A small, genuine smile touched his lips, a sight so rare it made my chest ache. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Chloe. Chloe had entered our orbit 6 months ago, a junior architect at his firm. She was his green tea, a term I'd learned from a late-night deep dive into internet slang. She presented herself as sweet, pure, unassuming, and endlessly in need of a strong man's guidance. She was everything I wasn't, delicate where I was sturdy, effusively admiring where I was quietly supportive, helpless where I was fiercely independent. To the world and to Liam she was just a sweet, clumsy young woman who adored her brilliant boss. To me she was a subtle, insidious poison, and Liam was drinking every drop. My phone buzzed softly in my clutch. A text from my best friend Maya. "How's date night with the emotionally constipated?" I stifled a sigh. Maya had been trying to get me to see the light for years. "He doesn't deserve you, Alara. He hasn't since he threw a tantrum because you got the lead in the school play and he didn't." "It's from Chloe," Liam said, not looking up from his screen. "She's having a crisis with the 3D renderings for the Kensington project. The file corrupted. Poor thing is in tears at the office." Poor thing. The words were coded in a syrupy concern he never used for me. When my server crashed last week, losing a week's worth of design plans, his response had been, "You should have backed it up. Rookie mistake, Alara." "On a Friday night?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "She's dedicated. Unlike some of the other juniors." He finally put his phone down, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "I might have to swing by the office after this, just to make sure she's okay." The dismissal was a physical blow. This was supposed to be our night. A celebration of our 20-year anniversary. Not of dating, but of the day we'd met on that playground. A milestone I cherished and he tolerated. "Liam," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "We have plans. You promised we'd go to that new gallery opening after dinner." His eyes flicked back to me, the brief warmth from Chloe's text gone, replaced by cool irritation. "Alara, be reasonable. This is a multi-million-dollar project. A gallery can wait." "I've been looking forward to it all week," I pressed, a spark of the girl I used to be, the one who fought for the lead role, who dreamed in color and shape, flaring to life. "My work is important too. My client is expecting a concept inspired by that artist." He leaned back in his chair, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. Your work is picking out curtains and throw pillows. This is real architecture. Brick and mortar. It's not the same. The air left my lungs. For 20 years I had built my life around him. I had chosen a local university instead of my dream school in Italy to stay near him. I had calibrated my ambitions to not overshadow his. I had swallowed every slight, every dismissal, every time he made me feel small, all for the sake of that 7-year-old boy who promised to protect me. And in that moment, staring at his handsome, unfeeling face across the table, I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was my biggest threat. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of my quiet monosyllables and his distracted presence. He paid the bill without a word, his mind already at the office with the crying Chloe. We walked out into the cool night air, the silence between us thick and heavy. His black BMW was parked just around the corner. As we approached it, his phone rang again. He answered immediately, his voice softening. "Hey Chloe. No, don't worry. I'm on my way. Of course I'll help you fix it. It's going to be okay." He ended the call and turned to me, all business. "Get in. I'll drop you off at home first." Something inside me, something that had been bending for 2 decades, finally snapped. No. The word was quiet, but it stopped him in his tracks. He turned, his eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "What did you say?" I said no. My voice was stronger now, laced with a steel I didn't know I possessed. "I am not getting in that car, so you can drop me off like an inconvenient parcel and rush to comfort your green tea." His surprise morphed into anger. "What did you just call her?" "You heard me, Liam. She's not poor Chloe. She's a manipulative little snake who knows exactly which buttons to push, and you're too blind or too flattered to see it." His face darkened. "Don't you dare talk about her like that. She works harder than anyone and she respects me, which is more than I can say for you lately." Respect. I let out a bitter laugh that sounded foreign to my own ears. "You want respect? Then act like a man who deserves it. Not a boy who abandons his girlfriend on a special night to go hold the hand of a crying subordinate who can't do her job." The slap was so fast, so shocking that for a moment I didn't feel it. I only saw the blur of his hand and heard the sharp, sickening crack against my cheek. Time stopped. The street, the city sounds, the very air, it all froze. My hand flew to my stinging cheek, the heat of his palm print a brand of betrayal. My eyes met his, and in his I saw a flicker of instant regret, but it was drowned out by a defensive, towering rage. "Alara, he started, his voice tight. I didn't let him finish. I lowered my hand, the sting a catalyst that burned away the last 20 years of fog and submission. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not my childhood sweetheart but a stranger. Without a word I turned and started walking away. "Alara, where the hell are you going?" "Get back here," he shouted after me, his voice echoing in the quiet street. I didn't look back. I just walked, my heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the pavement. The sound of a lock turning, of a cage door swinging shut for the last time. The pain in my cheek was a clarion call. The era of Alara the doormat was over. The walk home was a numb, silent pilgrimage through the wreckage of my life. Each step was a hammer blow driving the reality deeper. He had hit me. The boy who swore to protect me. The man I had built my entire existence around. His hand, the same one that had once so carefully wiped gravel from my skinned knee, had struck my face with enough force to make my ear ring. The physical sting was already fading, but the psychic shockwave was just beginning to spread. It wasn't just the violence of it, though that was a canyon opening up between the before and the after. It was the why. He hadn't hit me because I'd insulted him. He'd hit me because I'd insulted her. I had dared to speak the truth about his precious Chloe, and that truth was a bridge too far. My phone buzzed incessantly in my purse, his name flashing on the screen like a persistent alarm bell. I ignored it, my fingers curling around the cool metal of my keys as I finally reached my apartment building. His apartment, technically. He'd bought it 2 years into his first big job and I'd moved in, filling it with my things, my colors, my life. But my name wasn't on the deed. Another one of Maya's pointed observations echoed in my mind. "You're decorating a cage, honey." A very tastefully appointed one, but a cage nonetheless. The silence of the apartment was a physical presence. It was in the sleek, minimalist furniture he preferred, in the cold, polished concrete floors, in the stark white walls that held only a few of my more subdued art pieces. I tried to warm it up to make it a home, but my efforts always felt like a superficial layer, a veneer that could be scraped off at any moment. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to a life I no longer recognized. I went straight to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. In the mirror, a stranger stared back. Her eyes were wide, shockingly clear, and held a glint of something hard and new. On her left cheek, a faint pink blush was forming, the ghost of his fingers. I pressed my own fingers against it, the coolness a counterpoint to the lingering heat. This mark on my skin was the first honest thing to happen between us in years. My phone started buzzing again, this time with a FaceTime request. I rejected it. Buzzed again. I rejected it. On the third try I picked up, but I didn't turn on the video. What? My voice was flat, devoid of the placating warmth he was used to. Alara, Jesus, where are you? Are you okay? His voice was a frantic mix of anger and a performative concern that made my stomach turn. I'm at the apartment. And no, I'm not okay. You hit me. There was a beat of silence, then a rush of excuses. I didn't mean to. You made me so angry. The things you were saying about Chloe. She's a kid, Alara. She looks up to me. And you were being so irrational, so jealous. Jealous. He was still trying to frame this as a cat fight, a petty squabble over his attention. He couldn't or wouldn't see that it was about fundamental respect, about the architecture of our entire relationship. I'm not jealous, Liam, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I am disgusted. Look, just let me come home. We'll talk about this. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I lost my temper. The apology was like everything else. A tool to get things back to normal, to restore the comfortable equilibrium where he was the sun and I was the loyal planet in his orbit. No, I said. What do you mean, no? I mean no, you are not coming home. Not tonight. He sputtered. You can't be serious. It's my apartment. The words hung in the air, a naked confirmation of everything. His apartment. His life. I was just a tenant. Then it should be easy for you to find somewhere else to sleep, I replied and ended the call. I then turned my phone to silent, watching as the screen lit up again and again with his name before finally going dark. The numbness was receding, replaced by a cold, clear-headed fury. It was a productive anger, one that bypassed tears and moved straight to action. I walked into the walk-in closet we shared. His side was immaculate, rows of custom-tailored suits and shirts organized by color. My side was a burst of texture and pattern. Flowing silk dresses, soft cashmere sweaters, stacks of jeans. I yanked my largest suitcase from the top shelf. I started with the practical things first. My important documents from the fireproof lockbox, my laptop, the external hard drive with all my business and design files. Then I moved to my clothes, not folding them with my usual care, but pulling them from the hangers in armfuls and stuffing them into the suitcase. I wasn't leaving for a trip. I was performing an extraction. Next, I went for the artifacts of me. The small watercolor painting of the Italian coastline my grandmother had given me, a dream I'd deferred. The first fabric swatch book from when I started my company. The battered copy of Jane Eyre I'd had since I was 14, its pages filled with notes about strong, independent women. I took the photographs, the one of me and my parents at my graduation, the one of Maya and I laughing on a beach vacation. I left every single picture of Liam and me. I left the expensive jewelry he'd bought me for birthdays and Christmases, the sparkling bribes for my compliance. I left the silk robe he'd gotten me from Paris, a gift from a business trip I hadn't been invited on. With every item I packed, I felt a piece of my soul slot back into place. This wasn't a retreat. It was a reclaiming. It was past 2 a.m. when I finally zipped the last suitcase shut. The apartment looked largely the same, but it felt hollowed out. The essence of me was gone. I had one last task. I found a notepad and a pen and sat down at the kitchen island, the cold marble of familiar surface under my palms. I didn't write a long, emotional letter. He didn't deserve my emotions anymore. I wrote with the clinical precision of a lawyer drawing up a contract. What you did tonight was unforgivable. But the slap was merely the punctuation on a sentence you've been writing for years. I have spent half my life loving you and the other half making myself smaller to fit into the shadow you cast. I am done. Do not contact me. I will be in touch through my lawyer to arrange for the collection of the rest of my belongings. Any further communication should go through them. Goodbye. I propped the note against the wine cooler, a place he was sure to see it. Then I picked up my suitcase, my carry-on bag of essentials, and the box holding the fragments of my former self, and I walked out the door. I didn't look back. The cab ride to Maya's was a journey through a sleeping city. I stared out the window, watching the blur of streetlights, feeling strangely, terrifyingly calm. The world hadn't ended. The ground hadn't swallowed me whole. I was still here. Maya was waiting at her door, her face a mask of worry that morphed into grim satisfaction when she saw my expression and the luggage. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a fierce, lavender-scented hug. "The guest room is made up," she said, taking my suitcase. "We'll burn his effigy in the morning. For now there's ice cream and bad reality TV." As I sat on her fluffy couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, a bowl of chocolate chip cookie dough in my hands, the first tear finally fell. It wasn't a tear of sadness for what I'd lost. It was a tear of relief for what I had finally, courageously chosen to leave behind. The unraveling was complete. Now it was time to weave a new tapestry with threads of my own choosing. The first morning of my new life dawned with the gentle, floral-scented light of Maya's spare room. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. The silence was different here. Softer, filled with the distant hum of her refrigerator and the chirping of sparrows on her balcony, not the oppressive, minimalist quiet of Liam's apartment. Then the memory of the previous night crashed over me, not as a wave of panic, but as a solid, undeniable fact. I was free. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. I could breathe deeply for the first time in years. My phone, when I finally turned it on, was a war zone. 27 missed calls from Liam. A string of texts that evolved rapidly. 2:15 a.m. Elara, call me. We need to talk. 2:30 a.m. This is ridiculous. Where are you? 3 a.m. I'm coming over to Maya's. I know you're there. 3:45 a.m. Okay, fine. You've made your point. Just let me know you're safe. 7 a.m. I'm sorry. I was a jerk. A huge jerk. Please let's hope. 7:30 a.m. Are you really going to do this? Over one little mistake? One little mistake. The phrase made my blood run cold. It was a masterclass in minimization. A little mistake was forgetting to buy milk. A little mistake was double booking a dinner reservation. Striking your partner across the face was a cataclysm. I didn't respond to any of them. I simply took a screenshot of the entire conversation, saved it to a folder I labeled The End, and then with a steady hand blocked his number. The act was more empowering than I could have imagined. It was me taking control of the narrative, of my own peace. Maya padded into the kitchen, her hair a wild cloud. I heard your phone buzzing like an angry hornet. You okay? I'm better than okay, I said, and I meant it. I blocked him. Her eyes widened and then a slow, proud smile spread across her face. Hell yeah, you did. The trash took itself out. She busied herself with the coffee maker. So what's the plan, boss? The plan. For so long, my plans had been contingent on Liam's schedule, his ambitions, his needs. Now the blank slate was terrifying and exhilarating. First, I said, I need to find a lawyer. Then an apartment. And I need to throw myself into work. The Patterson account is done and I have a clean slate. Good, Maya said, handing me a steaming mug. You focus on building your empire. I'll be your emotional support and chief wine supplier. The next few days were a whirlwind of purposeful activity. I met with a sharp, no-nonsense family lawyer named Evelyn Shaw, who listened to my story without a hint of judgment and immediately started drafting a letter to Liam regarding the retrieval of my remaining belongings. I found a small, sunny one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I'd always loved but Liam had deemed too bohemian. It had exposed brick, wide plank wooden floors, and a tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. It was everything his sterile, cold apartment was not. It was mine. I threw myself into my design business, Haven Interiors, with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years. I started reaching out to new high-end contractors. I revamped my website, pouring my newfound clarity into the copy, creating spaces that are not just lived in but felt. Homes that tell your story, not someone else's. It was my manifesto. Meanwhile, the storm on the other side of the silence was brewing. According to the snippets Maya gathered from mutual friends who were on Team Elara, Liam was not handling my radio silence well. He was apparently swinging between righteous indignation and bewildered panic. He showed up at Maya's building on the second day. The buzzer rang and his voice, strained and angry, came through the intercom. Alara. I know you're up there. We need to talk. This is childish. Maya, without consulting me, leaned into the speaker. She doesn't want to talk to you, Liam. The lady said no. Now piss off before I call the cops and tell them you're harassing my tenant. She was a magnificent liar. He left, but the attempts continued. He sent emails to my business account, which I automatically forwarded to Evelyn Shaw. He tried to call me from his office phone, which I also blocked. He was a ghost trying to rattle the chains of a house he no longer haunted. The most telling incident happened a week into my new life. I was at a boutique furniture store, sourcing a unique sideboard for a new client, when I felt a familiar presence. I looked up and there he was. Liam stood by the entrance, looking diminished. His usually impeccable suit was slightly rumpled, his hair was less perfectly styled, and there were shadows under his eyes. He was with Chloe. She was clinging to his arm, her face a perfect picture of wide-eyed, sympathetic concern. She was wearing a delicate cream-colored dress that made her look even more fragile. Our eyes met across the showroom. His filled with a complex mixture of hope, anger, and confusion. Chloe's gaze, however, was a different story. For a split second before she could arrange her features into their usual mask of sweetness, I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had won. She had the prize. Or so she thought. Liam disentangled himself from her and started walking towards me. Alara. I didn't move. I simply stood my ground, the sideboard forgotten. I felt calm, anchored in my new reality. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and pleading. You can't just disappear. We have 20 years of history. We had 20 years of history, I corrected him, my voice even. Past tense. Your lawyer can talk to my lawyer. He flinched as if I'd struck him. My calmness was clearly more disconcerting than any tearful scene he might have imagined. This is because of her, isn't it? He hissed, gesturing vaguely back towards Chloe, who was pretending to examine a throw pillow with intense interest. I told you it's nothing. She means nothing. This has nothing to do with Chloe, I said, and it was the truth. This has to do with you and me. It has to do with you hitting me. It has to do with 20 years of you treating me like an option while you were my only choice. Chloe is just a symptom, Liam. You were the disease. His face paled. He was so used to me framing our problems around other people. His long hours, his demanding family, his flirtatious colleagues. He had never been forced to look squarely at his own behavior. I said I was sorry, he insisted, his voice rising slightly. What more do you want? Do you want me to beg? Fine. I'm begging. Come home, Alara. That hasn't been my home for a long time, I said. I picked up my purse and my fabric samples. Goodbye, Liam. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I walked past him, giving a wide berth to where Chloe was standing. As I passed her, I caught her eye again. The triumph was gone, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. She had expected a fight, a messy emotional confrontation where she could play the calm, understanding peacemaker. She hadn't expected this. A woman so utterly done that she couldn't even be bothered to be angry. Stepping out of the store and into the bright sunlight, I felt lighter than air. I had faced the storm and I hadn't been swept away. I had stood in the eye of it, perfectly still, and watched it rage around me. The silence on my side of the world was no longer an absence. It was a presence. It was my peace. And I would defend it with everything I had. The encounter at the furniture store solidified my resolve. It was as if I had finally closed a heavy ancient book I'd been forced to read for 2 decades. The story was over. The cover was shut. Now I was free to write a new one. My new apartment became my sanctuary and my canvas. I painted the walls in warm, earthy tones. A deep terracotta for the living room, a soothing sage green for the bedroom. I filled the space with plants, their vibrant leaves a celebration of life. I hung my grandmother's watercolor in a place of honor above the fireplace and scattered my favorite books on floating shelves. Every choice was a declaration of independence. There wasn't a single gray wall or piece of cold, minimalist furniture in sight. Work became my rocket fuel. With the mental energy I'd previously spent on managing Liam's moods and schedule, I poured myself into Haven Interiors. I landed a contract to design a flagship store for a new sustainable clothing brand, A project that was creative, high-profile, and entirely mine. I worked late into the night not out of obligation but out of passion. The thrill of building something for myself was an addiction more potent than any approval I'd ever sought from Liam. A month into my new life, I was finalizing the mood boards for the flagship store. I needed a specific type of reclaimed wood, something with character and history. My usual supplier was out, so on a recommendation I found myself walking into Cedar and Iron, a custom woodworking studio in a converted warehouse on the edge of the city. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of sawdust, linseed oil, and ambition washed over me. It was a vast open space filled with the hum of machinery and the rhythmic sound of hand tools. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating floating dust motes that danced like gold flecks. Beautiful slabs of wood in various stages of processing leaned against walls and finished pieces. A stunning live-edge dining table, a sleek bookshelf with elegant joinery, stood as testaments to the skill within. A man with his back to me was bent over a large planer, his focus absolute. He wore a simple t-shirt stretched taut over a pair of broad, capable shoulders, and sawdust clung to the dark hair of his forearms. There was an easy confidence in his posture, a quiet command of his space. "Hello," I called out, not wanting to startle him. He turned off the machine and turned around, wiping his hands on a rag. And my breath caught in my throat. It was Ben Carter. Ben. My lab partner in high school chemistry. The quiet, observant boy with kind eyes and a wicked dry sense of humor that only emerged when you earned his trust. The boy who had asked me to the winter formal the same week Liam had dramatically claimed me as his girlfriend in front of the entire cafeteria. I turned Ben down gently, my heart already pledged to the loud, dazzling boy who promised protection. I'd always wondered, in a small, secret corner of my mind, what might have happened if I'd said yes. The boy was gone, replaced by a man. His face had lost its softness, all sharp, intelligent planes and a strong jaw dusted with a shadow of stubble. His eyes were the same, a warm, steady hazel, but they held a depth and a quiet sorrow that hadn't been there at 17. Cooked, real, grounded. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by a warm, genuine smile that crinkled their corners. Alara Mitchell. Ben, I said, my own smile feeling wide and unforced. Oh my God. Cedar and Iron. This is yours. Guilty as charged, he said, gesturing around the workshop with a hint of pride. I finally stopped building other people's dreams and started building my own. The statement resonated so deeply with my own recent journey that I felt a sudden, unexpected kinship. I know the feeling, I said softly. His gaze was perceptive, taking me in. My confident posture, the portfolio under my arm, the lack of a nervous energy that had once been my constant companion. I heard you became an interior designer. It suits you. You were always sketching beautiful rooms in the margins of your notes. I was stunned he remembered. Liam had never noticed. And you were always taking apart the classroom clock to see how it worked, I countered with a laugh. This suits you too. We fell into an easy conversation, the years melting away. There was no awkwardness, just a comfortable, rediscovered rhythm. I told him about my business, about the flagship store project, and the specific wood I was searching for. He listened, his head tilted, asking insightful questions about the feel I was going for, not just the specifications. I think I have just the thing, he said, leading me to the back of the workshop. He showed me a stack of reclaimed oak, salvaged from an old barn. It was gorgeous, rich with wormholes, nail marks, and a patina that only a century of life could bestow. It had a story. It's perfect, I breathed, running my hand over the rough, textured surface. It's exactly what I need. I can mill it for you, get it ready for your install, he said. But, would you want to see the process? It's pretty cool watching this old wood get a new life. The question was simple, but it felt significant. It was an invitation into his world, a world of creation and tangible results. It was the polar opposite of Liam's world of abstract designs and corporate politics. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it. Over the next 2 weeks, my visits to Cedar and Iron became the highlight of my days. I'd bring coffee and we'd talk while he worked. I learned that he'd been married young, it hadn't worked out, and he'd poured his heart into this business. He was quiet but not shy, thoughtful. He listened in a way that made me feel truly heard, as if my words were valuable. I found myself telling him things I hadn't even fully articulated to Maya. About the slow, soul-crushing erosion of my relationship with Liam, about the slap, about the terrifying freedom of starting over. He never offered empty platitudes or tried to fix it. He just listened, his presence a steady, comforting anchor. One afternoon I was watching him sand a piece of the oak, his movements smooth and practiced. The setting sun was painting the workshop in tones of gold and orange. You know, he said, not looking up from his work, in high school I was insanely jealous of Liam Hayes. I blinked, surprised. You were? Why? He switched off the sander and looked at me, his expression open and honest. Because he had you. And even back then I could see you were the real thing. The rest of us were just figuring ourselves out. But you had this light. It just seemed like he was always trying to find the dimmer switch. Tears pricked the back of my eyes. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. Liam's compliments had always been about how I looked on his arm, how I made his life easier. Ben was complimenting my very essence. He found the dimmer switch, Ben, I whispered. He turned it all the way off. Ben put down his sander and walked over to me, stopping a respectful distance away. His eyes were serious. Then it's a good thing you're the one who holds the power to turn it back on. And from where I'm standing, Alara, you're shining brighter than ever. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of wood and possibility, something shifted. The ghost of my past, the machine of my old life, felt a million miles away. Here in this warm, messy, creative space with this quiet, solid man, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost forever. Not just the capacity to love, but the belief that I deserved a love that didn't demand I make myself small. It was terrifying. And it was the most hopeful thing I'd felt in years. The flagship store installation was in 3 days, and the reclaimed oak from Ben's workshop was the star of the show. The large central display table was a masterpiece, its live-edge top showcasing a century of history, sanded smooth but with its scars and character proudly on display. It was, in many ways, a reflection of how I felt. Ben had become a constant, calming presence in my new, chaotic and wonderful life. Our friendship was a slow, steady burn, built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared understanding of starting over. We'd progressed from coffee in his workshop to dinners at my new apartment, where he'd marvel at my color choices and I'd listen, fascinated, as he explained the different properties of wood. It was easy. It was real. I was in my element, directing the placement of clothing racks and lighting fixtures, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. A cold dread trickled down my spine. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my phone buzzed again with a text from the same number. Lara, it's your mother. Please call me back. Liam is here and he's very upset. We need to talk about this. My blood ran cold. He'd gone to my parents. Of course he had. When he couldn't get to me directly, he would try to go through the people he thought could control me. My parents, especially my mother, had always adored Liam. He was the son they'd never had, the perfect, successful match for their daughter. They had never quite understood my career, my whims, but they understood a stable, wealthy architect. I excused myself from the install and walked to the back of the empty store, my heart pounding a sickening rhythm against my ribs. I took a deep, steadying breath and called the number back. My mother picked up on the first ring. Alara, finally. Her voice was tight with disapproval. Hi, Mom. What's going on? Liam is here, sweetheart. He's heartbroken. He told us what happened. He just left. Over a silly argument and a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I could picture Liam sitting in their pristine living room, playing the devastated, bewildered fiancé, carefully omitting the part where he assaulted me. Mom, it wasn't a silly argument. He hit me. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a long pause. Liam, hit you, she said, her voice laced with skepticism. Alara, that doesn't sound like the Liam we know. He's devastated. He says you've been under a lot of stress with your little business, that you've been imagining things. The world tilted. Imagining things. He was gaslighting me to my own parents. The audacity was breathtaking. I am not imagining things, I said, my voice trembling with a fury I struggled to contain. He slapped me across the face on a public street, because I confronted him about his inappropriate relationship with his junior architect. Oh, Ilara, my mother sighed, the sound heavy with condescension. You've always had such a dramatic streak. And you know how men are. They work closely with people. It doesn't mean anything. Liam has offered you a beautiful life. Secure life. Are you really going to throw away 20 years over a moment of passion? A moment of passion. I felt sick. She was choosing him. She was choosing the narrative of the perfect son-in-law over the lived experience of her own daughter. It wasn't passion, Mom. It was violence. And I am not throwing anything away. I am choosing myself. For the first time in my life, I am choosing myself. Don't be selfish, Alara. Think about your future. Think about what people will say. That was the final straw. The concern for appearances, the dismissal of my pain. I have to go, Mom. I have a multi-million-dollar project to manage. The future I'm building for myself doesn't include someone who hits me or parents who don't believe me. Please do not give Liam any more information about me. And tell him that if he contacts you or anyone in my family again, my lawyer will be in touch regarding a restraining order. I ended the call before she could respond, my entire body shaking. I leaned against the cool, unfinished wall, tears of rage and betrayal streaming down my face. The battle lines were drawn, and it was more lonely than I had anticipated. My phone buzzed again. It was Ben. How's the install going? Bringing you a late lunch. Tell me you've eaten something other than coffee today. The simple, caring text was a lifeline. I typed back, my fingers unsteady. Rough day. Family stuff. Lunch would be a lifesaver. 20 minutes later he was there holding a brown paper bag from my favorite deli. He took one look at my face and his own softened with concern. He didn't press. He just handed me the food and a bottle of water. Eat, he said softly. Then talk. Or don't talk. I'm here. We sat on upturned crates amidst the chaos of the unfinished store. I told him everything, about the call, my mother's dismissal, Liam's manipulation. He listened, his jaw tightening when I got to the part about the slap. When I finished he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you know, in woodworking there's a thing called a check. It's a crack that forms in the wood as it dries and seasons. Some people see it as a flaw, a weakness. They try to fill it with epoxy, hide it. But the best craftsmen, we see it as part of the wood's story. We work with it. We highlight it. Because it's proof that the wood lived, it endured, and it became stronger. What you're doing right now, Alara. This is you seasoning. It's painful and it's creating cracks in your old life. But you're not hiding them. You're building a new, stronger structure around them. And it's going to be breathtaking. I looked at him, at the absolute conviction in his eyes, and the icy knot in my chest began to thaw. He saw my pain not as a shameful secret, but as a part of my history, a testament to my strength. Thank you, Ben, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Anytime, he said, his hand covering mine in a brief, solid, comforting squeeze. Anytime. In that moment, the uninvited guest of my past, with all its drama and pain, felt far less powerful. I had an ally. I had a friend. And maybe, just maybe, I had the beginnings of something more. I had a man who saw the cracks in my soul and didn't think I was broken. He thought I was a masterpiece in the making. The day of the flagship store unveiling arrived. A nervous, electric energy hummed in my veins. This was more than a professional milestone. It was my debutante ball, my coming-out party as Alara Mitchell, sole proprietor of Haven Interiors, survivor and thriver. The space was a transformation. The reclaimed oak from Ben's workshop gleamed under the carefully calibrated lighting. Lush, hanging plants softened the industrial edges, and the clothing, artfully displayed, looked like wearable art against the textured, earthy backdrop. It was a perfect synthesis of my vision, warm, authentic, and deeply felt. It was the absolute antithesis of Liam's cold, minimalist world. Maya was my hype woman, flitting around in a stunning emerald green dress, making sure the caterers were in place and the champagne was chilled. They're going to eat their hearts out, honey. This is incredible. Ben arrived early, looking heartbreakingly handsome in a simple, well-tailored navy suit. He didn't look uncomfortable or out of place. He looked solid and real, an island of calm in the pre-event chaos. He came straight to me, his eyes sweeping over the finished space with genuine awe. Alara, he said, his voice low and full of warmth. I knew it would be beautiful from the plans, but this is a feeling. You created a feeling. His praise meant more to me than any clients could. I had a good muse, I said, gesturing to the central table he'd created. Our eyes met, and the air between us crackled with unspoken things. The friendship had deepened, tipped over into something more, but neither of us had made a move, content to let the connection solidify at its own pace. The guests began to arrive. Local press, influencers, clients, and colleagues. The air filled with the buzz of conversation and admiration. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting compliments, my confidence growing with each interaction. I was in my element. This was who I was meant to be. And then I saw him. Liam stood near the entrance, his presence a sudden cold draft in the warm room. He was wearing his power suit, the one he wore for important client pitches, and his face was a carefully constructed mask of polite interest, but his eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for me. Chloe was not with him. He had come alone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, fearful rhythm. This was my territory, my triumph. His presence felt like a violation. Maya materialized at my side, her hand on my arm. "Want me to have security toss him?" she muttered, her eyes narrowed. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "No, I'm not letting him ruin this." I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and continued my conversation with the editor of a prominent design blog. I would not acknowledge him. I would not give him the satisfaction. But Liam was not a man used to being ignored. He waited for the editor to move away and then closed the distance between us. He smelled of his familiar, expensive cologne, a scent that once made my heart flutter and now made my stomach clench. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur that was meant to sound loving but felt possessive. I turned to him, my expression neutral, the mask of a professional hostess firmly in place. "Liam, this is a surprise. I didn't know you were interested in sustainable fashion." The slight barb hit its mark. His jaw tightened. "I'm interested in you. We need to talk. You've blocked me everywhere. You had your lawyer send me a letter." "What is this?" "It's called moving on, Liam," I said calmly, taking a sip of my champagne. "I'd recommend you try it." His composure began to crack. The mask of the concerned, loving boyfriend slipped, revealing the petulant, entitled man beneath. "Move on. From 20 years. You can't just throw us away like yesterday's trash, Ilara. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I've been to therapy. I'm working on my temper." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, my tone indicating I was anything but. "I hope it helps you in your future relationships." His eyes darkened. He looked around the bustling, successful event, at the clear evidence of my life and my success flourishing without him. This was not the broken, pining woman he expected to find. This was a woman who had not just survived without him but had thrived. "Is this about him?" Liam hissed, his gaze snapping across the room to where Ben was standing, talking comfortably with the owner of the clothing brand. I followed his gaze. Ben felt the attention and looked over. His expression shifted from polite interest to protective alertness when he saw who I was talking to. He began to make his way towards us, not rushing but with a determined, steady pace. "This has nothing to do with Ben," I said, my voice cold and final. "This has everything to do with the fact that I don't love you anymore. I don't even like you. The moment your hand hit my face, every fond memory I had of you was incinerated." The raw, brutal honesty seemed to physically stagger him. He had expected negotiation, tears, a scene he could control. He had not expected utter, complete indifference. "You don't mean that," he whispered, his face pale. "I have never meant anything more in my life," I replied. Ben arrived then, standing slightly beside and behind me, a silent, solid pillar of support. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a statement. Liam looked from my resolute face to Ben's protective stance, and the last vestiges of his control shattered. The bewildered panic I'd seen glimpses of was now fully formed on his face. He truly couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that I, Ilara, his constant, his shadow, had cut him off so completely and was standing there, radiant and successful, looking at him as if he were a stranger. "You're throwing away everything we had for a carpenter?" The sneer in his voice was ugly. "He's an artist," I corrected him softly. "And he's a good man. Something you wouldn't recognize." That was the final blow. Liam stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He had lost. Not to a rival but to my own self-respect. The game was over and he hadn't even known the rules had changed. Without another word, he turned and pushed his way through the crowd, disappearing out the door. The space he left behind felt instantly lighter, cleaner. Ben's hand found the small of my back, a warm, steadying pressure. "You okay?" I looked up at him, at the kindness and strength in his eyes, and then I looked around at my creation, my world, filled with light and life in my own making. A genuine, effortless smile spread across my face. "I'm perfect," I said. And for the first time I knew it was the truth. The unveiling was complete. Not just of the store but of me. The high from the successful unveiling lasted for days. The store was featured in 2 major design blogs, and my inbox was flooded with inquiries from new, exciting clients. Haven Interiors was no longer just a business. It was a rising star. The victory was sweet, made sweeter by the memory of Liam's stunned, defeated face as he slunk out of my triumph. But life, I was learning, wasn't a straight line upwards. The confrontation with my parents had left a festering wound. Their disbelief felt like a betrayal that ran deeper than Liam's. His was the betrayal of a partner. Theirs was the betrayal of a foundation I thought was unshakable. A week after the unveiling, I found myself sitting in my sunny apartment, staring at a box I'd asked a neutral third party to collect from Liam's place. It held the last, insignificant remnants of my old life. A forgotten hairdryer, a few winter coats, a stack of my old design magazines. I hadn't had the heart to open it. It felt like Pandora's box, filled with the ghosts of a woman I no longer was. A soft knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Ben. He held a bag of fresh bagels and a carton of coffee. He took one look at my face and the unopened box in the middle of the room and understood immediately. "Rough morning?" he asked, setting the food down on my kitchen counter. "Just dealing with the ashes," I said, gesturing vaguely at the box. He nodded, not needing further explanation. You don't have to open it. You could just take it straight to the dumpster." Ceremonially. The idea was tempting. Part of me wants to. The other part feels like I need to. I don't know, bear witness. To prove to myself that it's really over. "Then we'll do it together," he said simply. "You don't have to sift through the ashes alone." His use of the same metaphor I'd thought of moments before sent a shiver through me. It was that connection, that eerie, wonderful understanding that seemed to hum between us more and more. We sat on the floor, cross-legged, and I sliced the tape on the box with a pair of scissors. The first thing on top was a framed photograph. It was of me and Liam on a beach vacation 5 years ago. My smile was bright, but my eyes had a vague, anxious look I now recognized as the constant low-grade fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. It's small. I put it aside face down. "Dumpster," I stated. Ben gave a supportive nod. We worked through the box. A few books, a cheap trophy from a bowling league we'd joined on a whim, a scarf his mother had given me. Each item was a tiny artifact from a dig site of a dead civilization. There was no nostalgia, only a clinical sort of curiosity. Did I really wear this? Did I ever find this funny? Then at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was the silk robe from Paris. The one he'd bought me after a trip I wasn't invited on. I'd always hated it. It was a size too small, a color that washed me out, and a style that was too fussy for my taste. It was a gift chosen for the woman he wanted me to be, not the woman I was. I held it up, the slippery fabric feeling alien in my hands. "He got this for me after he came back from a business trip. He'd taken Chloe, said he needed her for client relations." I let out a short, bitter laugh. I cried for 3 days. And then I wore it for him once, feeling like a fraud. Ben was quiet for a moment, watching me, his expression unreadable. Then he held out his hand. "Give it to me." Puzzled, I handed him the robe. He stood up, walked over to my small fireplace, purely decorative but functional with gas logs, and turned the knob. A warm, blue-orange flame sprang to life. "What are you doing?" I asked, getting to my feet. "Turning ashes into air," he said, and with a calm, deliberate motion he dropped the expensive silk robe into the flames. It caught immediately, the synthetic fibers melting and blackening, the garish color being consumed by the pure, hot fire. We stood there together, watching it burn. It wasn't an act of rage. It was an act of ritual. A final, physical severance. As the last of the fabric curled into embers, I felt a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying lift from my shoulders. The past was truly past. It was ash and smoke. I turned to Ben, tears in my eyes, but they were tears of release, of relief. "Thank you," I whispered. He cupped my face in his warm, rough hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears. You deserve more than gifts that make you cry, Alara. You deserve a love that feels like coming home. His words were the final key, turning the last lock on the cage of my old life. I looked into his steady hazel eyes and saw a future. Not a perfect fairy tale future, but a real, solid, beautiful one. A future built on respect, on shared silence, on mutual creation. I think, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I'm starting to find it. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. I rose onto my toes and met him halfway. The kiss was not a frantic, passionate clash like the ones I'd shared with Liam in our early years. It was slow. It was deep. It was a conversation. It tasted of coffee and understanding and a promise of mornings filled with quiet companionship and shared dreams. It was an anchor, not a chain. It was the feeling of being truly, completely seen, and being loved not in spite of my scars, but with them as part of my story. When we finally pulled apart, my head was spinning, but my world had never felt more right side up. The ashes of my past were cooling in the fireplace, and in front of me stood my future, his hands still holding my face as if I were the most precious, fragile and powerful thing he'd ever held. He rested his forehead against mine. Okay, he murmured. A real, joyful, unburdened smile broke across my face. More than okay. I was free. I was whole. And I was for the first time truly, deeply loved. Spring melted into a summer that felt like my own personal renaissance. The city bloomed around me and so did I. My life, which for so long had been a monochrome study in managing Liam's world, was now a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of my own choosing. My business, Haven Interiors, was thriving. The flagship store project led to a commission to design a boutique hotel, my biggest project to date. I hired 2 junior designers, and the feeling of mentoring them, of fostering their creativity, was more satisfying than any of Liam's backhanded compliments had ever been. My relationship with Ben was the quiet, steady heartbeat at the center of my new existence. It was profoundly different from anything I'd ever known. There were no dramatic fights, no walking on eggshells, no power struggles. There was only a deep, abiding respect and a companionship that felt as essential as breathing. We spent our weekends exploring flea markets for unique finds, cooking elaborate meals in my colorful kitchen, or simply reading on my balcony, our silence a comfortable shared language. He was building a custom dining table for my new apartment, a project he worked on during lazy Sunday afternoons. I loved watching him work, the focused quiet he brought to the space, the way his hands, so strong and capable, could execute the most delicate of tasks. It was a metaphor for our entire relationship, strong, intentional, and beautifully crafted. One such Sunday my phone buzzed. It was my father. My relationship with my parents had been strained since the call with my mother. We'd exchanged a few terse texts, but the chasm between us felt wide and deep. Seeing his name on my screen sent a jolt of anxiety through me. "Hi, Dad," I answered, my voice cautious. "Ilara." His voice was gruff but softer than I expected. "Your mother and we saw the feature on your store in the Design Quarterly." I held my breath. "Oh. It's very impressive, sweetheart," he said, and I could hear the genuine note of pride in his voice. "We had no idea you were capable of something like that. It's a real business. A serious one." The validation, something I'd craved from them for years, washed over me, but it didn't define me anymore. I didn't need it to breathe, but it was nice to feel its warmth. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot." There was a pause. "Liam came by again last week," he said, his tone shifting. He was not himself. Agitated. "He said some things about you, and about a man you're seeing. Accusatory things." My guard went up. "I'm sure he did." "Your mother was ready to believe him," Dad continued, his voice low. "But I looked at that man, really looked at him, and I saw someone who was losing. And then I looked at the pictures of your work, of you at that event, and I saw someone who was winning. I'm sorry, Lara. I'm sorry we didn't believe you about what happened. A man doesn't get that desperate if he's the one who walked away." Tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't a full-throated apology, but from my stoic, traditional father, it was a seismic shift. It was an acknowledgement. He was choosing me. "It's okay, Dad," I whispered, meaning it. "It's all okay now." We talked for a few more minutes, the conversation easier than it had been in years. When I hung up, I felt another layer of the old world slough away. I was rebuilding bridges on my own terms. Ben, who had been sanding a table leg, had paused to listen. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me, holding me without a word. He didn't need the details, he could feel the shift in my energy. "He's proud of me," I said into his chest, my voice muffled. "Of course he is," Ben said, his voice a soft rumble against my ear. "How could he not be?" Later that evening we were sitting on my floor, the new dining table almost finished between us, sharing a bottle of wine. The setting sun cast long, golden shadows across the room. "I have something for you," Ben said, a shy, almost nervous smile playing on his lips. It was an expression I'd never seen on him before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, clumsily wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked, taking it. "It's not my birthday. It's a just because gift," he said. "I saw it and thought of you." I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small, beautifully crafted wooden box. It was made from a rich, dark walnut, and the lid was inlaid with a delicate, swirling pattern of lighter maple. It was exquisite. I ran my fingers over the smooth, silky surface. "Ben, it's beautiful," I breathed. "Open it," he urged softly. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, wasn't jewelry. It was a single old-fashioned brass key. I looked at him, confused. "It's a key to my workshop," he said, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my heart stop. "It's not a promise of moving in together or anything like that. It's a key to my space. My sanctuary. I've never given one to anyone before. I want you to have it. I want you to know that my world is always open to you. No conditions. No questions asked." I stared at the key, then back at his face, and the love I felt for this man was so overwhelming it stole my breath. This was the antithesis of every grand, empty gesture Liam had ever made. This was real. This was vulnerable. This was a sharing of a soul. He wasn't giving me a key to his apartment, he was giving me a key to his heart, to the messy, creative, sacred space where he was most himself. Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I clutched the box to my chest. "It's the most perfect gift anyone has ever given me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He leaned forward and kissed me, a sweet, lingering kiss that tasted of wine and a future I couldn't wait to build. Later, as we lay tangled together in my bed, the moon casting a silver glow through the window, I thought about the twisted path that had led me here. The slap, the pain, the betrayal, they were all part of the story, but they were no longer the title. The title was no longer about Liam and his green tea. It was about me. It was about Alara, who had been slapped by her childhood sweetheart and had found the courage to walk away. It was about the woman who cut him off and built a life so beautiful and full of love that his disbelief became nothing more than a footnote in her glorious second-chance romance. The revenge wasn't in hurting him back. It was in my own boundless, brilliant happiness. And it was the sweetest thing I had ever known. The end.